All right, welcome to our quick review of Hearths of Agriculture. And this is one of those things where you're going to want to know it, but a reasonable chunk of it is going to be kind of instinctual, and hopefully some of it you've actually already learned. So the slides themselves, again, designed to accompany the book The Cultural Landscape, and I am your lecturer, Miss Gall. So when we talk about agriculture, let's go ahead and we'll start right at the beginning. Talk about some of the origins of agriculture. And agriculture itself is that deliberate modification of the Earth's surface through the cultivation of plants and or rearing of animals. So cultivation, again, means to care for, okay? And a crop is any plant cultivated by people. Okay, so agriculture gets its start when people start actually taking care of plants and culling them, weeding, right? Looking for the best of a plant, maybe the one that gives the most grains or holds up the best under given weather conditions, that kind of thing. But also includes, and this is important to remember, it also includes animals and the domestication of various kinds of animals. And you should have learned at least a little bit about this in the 6th and 7th grade when you were taking ancient world history. So hopefully this isn't completely new material to you. When human beings got their start, really what we were hunter-gatherers. And that's a fancy way of saying we basically scrabbled out eating whatever we could get away with. So some people, typically the males in a community, hunted and sought out meat and proteins of that sort. And then women gathered roots, berries, whatever kind of edible plants that they could find. Of those hunter-gatherers that started out, there's actually, believe it or not, approximately 250,000 remaining today. And we see them in parts of Papua New Guinea. You see them in the Amazon rainforest. And really where you find these folks are in those areas that are essentially untouched by modern development. When we talk about the invention of agriculture, though, we're really not sure exactly when it began, but what we do know is that it began in many distinct and different places, and what we see are different plants and different animals getting domesticated in different places. And domesticated is really a fancy way of saying that human beings take care of them and that they become a reliable part of our system. Okay, so we've got a couple of maps here that we're going to look at. The first one is we're going to look at crop hearths. And again, these are things you're going to want to know at least the basics, right? You should know that potatoes get their start in Central America. I know we associate them with Ireland, but they got their start in Central America and they move as part of that Columbian exchange. Maize, right? Corn. That one you probably are a little more familiar with, right? You get the yam, which is a type of, well, it's similar to a sweet potato. Okay, sorghum, which you've probably never heard of, but is a cereal grain. African rice, coffee, various types of millet get their start really in Central Africa. Okay. And then we've got several different types of wheat, lentil, oats, rye, okay, olives, barley. These are, by the way, mostly cereal crops, get their start in the Middle East, in that Fertile Crescent, and spread outward from there. And you do need to know, by the way, where the Fertile Crescent is. So you should be able to spot that on a map. Then over in China, what we get are things like chestnuts, walnuts, rice, of course, soybeans. And some of this stuff should make sense. Some of this stuff is just, it's foods that you associate with certain areas. Okay, so hopefully that can kind of help you remember it. When we look at Southeast Asia or the South Pacific, we get into mango, taro, coconut, right? Those, by the way, are all different types of fruits, except maybe coconut. And then what you see is that they spread outwards from those areas, and you see them diffuse and grow across time. Okay, so when we're looking at our map, we've got some primary and secondary hearths. Okay, and secondary just means that it started there a little bit later. And then we've got our dispersal routes, and that's just a fancy way of saying how it spread, right? How it diffused across time. When you look at your lists, anything in red started roughly 9,000 years ago or more. The green, 7 to almost 9. Purple, 3 to almost 7. And then anything in black, we're not really sure exactly when it was domesticated. Okay, the second map we're going to look at, and this is really the last slide we've got, looks at animal hearths and where certain animals were domesticated. So for instance, the modern turkey gets its start in central Mexico. If I had to guess, that looks like it's probably somewhere right near Mexico City. Llamas and alpacas get domesticated in, so I believe that's Peru. I could be wrong there. But a lot of the domesticated animals, most of the domesticated animals occur in either the Fertile Crescent or in Asia. Okay, so pigs, sheep, goats, dogs, some types of cattle, all Fertile Crescent, right? Northern Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, right around there. Horses get domesticated in kind of right along that Europe-Asia borderline. Okay. And chickens are largely a Southeast Asia phenomenon. Cattle get domesticated in India, right? That kind of makes sense when you stop and think about it with the cattle, and if you know anything at all about Hinduism and how they appreciate cows, right? That kind of makes sense that that belief system would have grown up with simultaneously that domestication of animals. Okay, so just a quick review of the color code. Of course, red 12,000 years ago, right? Dog, man's best friend. That kind of makes sense that they were domesticated the oldest. Anything in green, so our sheep, our goats, roughly 9,000 years ago. Pig, cattle, chicken, about 8,000 years ago, give or take. Llamas and alpacas, about 6,000 years ago. And turkeys, we're not really sure when they were domesticated, but we know that it occurred a really, really long time ago. So this has been our quick review of agricultural hearths and origins. And agriculture, again, just that idea of propagating plants or animals for human gain. And of all of the hearths, the biggest ones you got to know, absolutely. Okay, you need to know the Fertile Crescent. You need to know China and India as hearths of agriculture, and that western coast of South America into Central America is another big hearth for agriculture. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to bring them in and come see me, and I'd be delighted to answer any questions you have.